At this time, I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Dysart Unified School District Governing Board to order. Let the record reflect that all board members are present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll move to recognitions and celebrations. B1, choir performance. Dr. Dean.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Governing Board, members of Cabinet, and our community this evening. We are pleased to have one of our outstanding elementary school choirs with us, and I'll turn this over to Dr. Croto for introductions.
Thank you, Dr. Dean. Madam President, members of the board, Cabinet and guests, it is our pleasure tonight to have Asante Preparatory Academy choir here to sing for us, and we are going to turn it over to Miss Lauren Mellinson, and the floor is yours. Let's hear it.
Very good job. Thank you so much for sharing your talent with us. That was wonderful. How many grade levels are represented in your choir?
We have 4 grade levels, 5th through 8th.
My goodness. Good job. Thanks for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Do you want to wait a couple minutes for them to clear out? All right, next we're going to move on to B2, 2022 ESPN Honor Roll. Dr. Dean.
Madam President, members of the governing board, cabinet, and our community this evening, we are very excited for this next recognition, and I'll turn this over to Dr. Croto as well. Dr. Croto.
Thank you, Dr. Dean. Madam President, members of the board, cabinet, guests. Tonight we're here to honor Valley Vista High School, the Unified Sports Program. They were awarded a National Banner Unified School. So what does that mean? Special Olympics Unified Champion School has an inclusive school climate and exudes a sense of collaboration, engagement, and respect for all members of the student body and staff. A Unified Champion School receiving national banner recognition is one that has demonstrated commitment to inclusion by meeting 10 national standards of excellence. Those standards were developed by a national panel of leaders from special education and the education community. With that being awarded this evening, ESPN has also recognized this group as 22 honor roll school, so one of the top in the nation for their unified sports program. And this program's under the direction of Rebecca Millibar, and I believe she's here too tonight. Is she up in front? I can't see. Great job. Well, congratulations. That is an awesome achievement. I believe they have a plaque there. We have a plaque there we want to get in the picture too, I think, up in the back. While they're taking a picture, if you want to see those 10, the 10 standards of excellence, you can go on the Special Olympics Unified Champion Schools, and they list all 10 of them there. Some pretty cool accomplishments to meet all 10 areas. So congratulations. We are proud of you. We're going to move on here to our next recognition. We have some middle-level athletic champions to celebrate tonight. So I would like to call up the K champion softball team, the Surprise Cubs, if they can come up for winning the softball championship. The coach for the Surprise Cubs is Kelly Parker. Ms. Parker, congratulations to your team. Yeah. All right, a round of applause for Surprise. Congratulations. Our next championship is a baseball team, the Asante Rangers. Come on up. Congratulations. The Asante Rangers, the baseball club, is coached by Mr. Lon Shears. So congratulations, Mr. Shears. Round of applause for Asante. Great job. And our last championship is kind of new this year. So as you know, earlier in the year, we announced that we are going to be part of the Northwest Valley Athletic Conference. And what that means is our schools will play other district schools. So this is a combined tournament with schools from Peoria and Deer Valley Unified. And they play in a championship format. And we have a baseball team that won the first ever Northwest Valley Athletic Conference. And that is the Sunset Hill Bobcats. Come on up. That is a great job representing the West Valley there. Great job. And they are coached by Mr. Chuck Mullet. Congratulations to Sunset Hills, and way to represent Dysart Unified School District. Congratulations. And that concludes our presentations.
Yes. All right. Okay, next we will move on to C, address the governing board, audience with individuals. Ms. Chaffin?
We don't have any.
All right. We'll move next to superintendent and governing board update with a student update. Dr. Dean?
Madam President, members of the governing board, members of cabinet, and our community, I do not believe that our student is here this evening, Mr. Musi. Oh, there she is. All right. How are you today? Outstanding. It's your turn.
Welcome.
At our board meeting, we talked about our end of the year conference and started splitting up into committees across the Dysart High Schools to plan it. And then we also have been talking a lot about community service and the community service we've been doing at our school, like our canned food drive, and then planning a community service activity for the group before the semester ends, and then one after the semester ends as well.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And would you remind us again of your name and what school you attend?
Braley Ratliff, and I attend Valley Vista High School.
Very good. Thank you, Grace. Very nice to see
Thank
you.
you for being here. Next, we move to superintendent update. Dr. Dean?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board, cabinet, and our community. This evening, I would like to start by saying congratulations to Ms. Densmore and Ms. Drake on their success in the board election. Congratulations to both of you. And we look forward to Ms. Densmore, you continuing on the board and welcoming Ms. Drake on the board on January 1st. I also would like to extend thanks to both Ms. Mollica and Mr. Conium for their continued interest in being part of our school district and its community. So thank you for all that were involved there. I would like to give the board a really good update as it relates to the installation of the security glass in our schools. We have all of the elementary schools except 3 have been installed, and those 3 are going to be installed next week, and the high schools will be starting right after. So we're finally getting this project rolling, and we've received really good support and comments from our community as well as our employees. So it's a very good project that is continuing to make our schools as safe as possible. This morning on Channel 15 featured a story from Shadow Ridge High School on a financial fitness day that was held a few weeks ago, in which our students participated in events that were real life as it related to personal finance. And they were given jobs and salaries as it related to their jobs, and then they had to go through from station to station to station learning how to budget money, from everything from housing expenses to utilities to groceries and everything that's related in adulting. And very quickly students realized how far a dollar does not stretch or how far a dollar could stretch. And so we were excited, first of all, for that event for our students. It was a great opportunity for them to see math in a real life setting. And more importantly, we want to thank Channel 15 for spotlighting both Shadow Ridge and that event. It was a fantastic event. We also want to let our community know that we will have curriculum available to review coming up starting tomorrow at Freedom Traditional Academy, and that will be 4th through 6th grade English and Language Arts curriculum, as well as AP Economics, Advanced Placement Economics. And our community can come in and review that curriculum at Freedom Elementary School both before and after school, and that will be available through January the 13th. If anyone in our community has questions about that, they can give us a call here at the district office, and we'll be more than happy to answer those. Also, just a couple of other things we want to highlight. As the board is aware, we are working to schedule a study session related to policy and policy transition on December 8th, and we believe Ms. McClendon will be able to join us for that. And then the last thing we would like to state is that today is day 70 in the school year. I continue to say it, and it continues to be true. The school year is flying by. Our students and our staff are doing a tremendous job, and tomorrow we reach the Thanksgiving holiday. And as a reminder, all of our schools will be closed next week. The district office will be closed on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And I just would like to wish everyone in our community and our governing board as well a very happy Thanksgiving. And that concludes my report for the evening.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to governing board update. I too would just like to thank our Dysart community for taking the time to cast your votes on election day. Based on the results of the governing board race, I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate Ms. Densmore and Ms. Drake. I know you'll lead the district well, and I'm looking forward to working with you and continuing to serve with you as well, Ms. Densmore. Also, last week I attended the Veterans Day Assembly at Canyon Ridge School. It's one of my most treasured Dysart traditions. They always do such a phenomenal job. I'd like to thank Canyon Ridge administration and staff for their hospitality, and of course would like to thank the man behind the curtain, Mr. Rosso, who always does just an amazing job organizing the assemblies and honoring our veterans. And finally, I would like to just as well wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and hope you have a peaceful day with friends and family. That's all I have. Anyone else?
Oh, mine's short. I attended the Marley Park Veterans Day celebration, and then I just want to say thank you to all the schools for all the celebrations they did to honor the veterans. I saw lots of pictures, and it was really very nice. So sorry I couldn't go to all of them, but thank you.
I attended the Veterans Day Assembly at Freedom Traditional Academy, and I just love how connected they and many of our schools are with our local veterans and our active military families. Special thanks to Mrs. Wolford for a wonderful assembly. As this is our last meeting before Thanksgiving, I do want to express my gratitude for all of our Dysart staff, our parents, and our students. And of course, my heartfelt gratitude for those that supported me in retaining this seat on the Dysart Governing Board. Your confidence in my leadership has been overwhelming, and I feel truly blessed to be given this opportunity to continue to advocate for all members within our community and to move Dysart forward. I also want to congratulate Jennifer Drake and let her know how fortunate that Dysart is to have her leadership beginning in January. I also want to mention that running for office is full of joy and also full of stress. It can and has been ugly beyond measure. It takes a toll on each candidate, their families, and definitely our physical and our mental health at times. I am truly thankful for all of those that expressed interest in serving, whether they seriously considered it, officially filed, withdrew in some cases, or fell short. Dysart is a truly remarkable district, and we are very fortunate to have a great many willing to make these sacrifices to serve. Thank you.
Okay, so I wasn't here at the last board meeting, so I got a couple of them for you. On October 19th, I visited with David Birnbaum's chemistry class at Shadow Ridge to witness some awesome experiments that he had for his students. It has been several years since I've even walked into a chemistry class, but it was awesome experience. Thank you, Mr. B. On October 20th, I visited Kingswood Elementary when Arizona State Senator David Livingston held a Q&A session with the middle school students on the branches of government for both state and federal, regarding also the Arizona Constitution and things to pass, what it takes to pass a bill. So thank you to also Tracy Livingston, his wife, and a Dysart teacher for this event. It was really cool. October 21st, I was invited to the 9th annual ACEE, which is the Arizona Council for Economic Education, celebration of education for our teachers across the state. It was a very, very well attended event, and I wish more people would be able to go. On October 26th, I attended the Career in College Expo that was here at the district office. Thank you, Mr. Grieshaber, and all of his team for the event. I actually brought my mother to the event, and she was truly astonished on how many little pieces of information it takes in order to put such a great event on. So thank you for everybody that attended and the number of students that were in attendance. October 26th, same day, but we went from the expo over to Willow Canyon to see the Addams Family musical. It was funny and engaging and just downright funny. So thank you, Mr. Walgren, and the Troop 6901 for an amazing evening. November 7th, served as a volunteer at Shadow Ridge for the financial fitness that Dr. Dean had just said. It's a great student program, and it exposes our students to decision-making stations and real-world issues on financial life choices for critical things such as housing, transportation, insurance, health care. These are real-life situations that our kiddos face once they leave high school. I had also, I would guess you could all say dragged. I brought Dr. Blossom Tandy, who was a former board member, with me, and she thoroughly enjoyed it as well. And lastly, I am going to go on record for my next statement, which is part of my update. On October 27th, at that board meeting, I was ill and could not attend. And one of the agenda items was to approve superintendent contract for Dr. Dean. And I want to let Dr. Dean know that he would have had my support at that meeting. It would have been a 5-0 vote, full support for you, Dr. Dean. I know you've been interviewing for this since May 12th. But honestly, you've been interviewing for this for 18 years, the time that you've been with Dysart. Years ago, you came on with Dysart as a principal, and of course, we experienced a major growth. We were opening 2 to 3 schools a year, several years at a time. It just blew up. And for the growth, the surprise. I know you started up as a startup principal, going around opening these schools, you know the ebb and flow, and you probably know where all the skeletons are buried with the district. So over those 18 years, principal, you headed up the PR department, the HR department, and then this assistant superintendent for support services. But I would be remiss in my duty as a governing board member to not warn you to please watch your back. We had an amazing superintendent in Dr. Kellis. He started amazing programs, initiatives in Dysart. Dysart flourished and put Dysart on a great path. We have 4 middle schools. Teacher pay increased. And just recently, we had the labels that were just issued with many of our schools with A labels, Bs, Cs. We really had a great movement under his direction. You had teams in place, principals, directors, teachers, classified, all different staff. But you also had a front row seat. You saw firsthand witness of how easy it is to remove a superintendent by the majority of this board through carefully crafted, strategic, planned moves to a person who didn't do anything legally, immorally, unethically, or financially disparaging to Dysart. He had a vision, and it was extraordinary. I have faith in you, Dr. Dean. I have a lot of faith in you. But just because when some folks smile in your direction doesn't mean that they're not helping you along. You will be successful. I know you will. So please, go with grace, go with God, go do the job that you have been training to do for the past 18 years. Congratulations. I support you, and I have faith in you. I appreciate what you're doing. And lastly, also, please, Dysart community, have a safe and wonderful Thanksgiving holiday and come back safe and sound. Thank you.
Anyone else? Next, we'll move to motion to approve consent agenda items. I move the governing board approve consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Christine Pritchard, seconded by Tracy Sawyer-Sinkville. Tracy. Motion carries. Next, we move to information discussion items. G1, information on state testing data and school accountability A through F letter grades. Dr. Dean.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board, cabinet, and our community. This evening, Amy Harchin, our Director of Research, will present information related to our state testing data from last school year, as well as our school accountability A through F letter grades. That, once again, the state did a good job of releasing in a timely manner. I say that facetiously, as we took the tests in April and got the school labels on November the 1st. So that being said, this evening we are proud to present the information. Ms. Harchin.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Dean, and cabinet. So yes, as Dr. Dean mentioned, I'm going to do kind of a twofer. I'm going to do some state testing information, which of course leads to a major component of our school labels. So just to give you a review, last year for spring of 2022, we had some new tests in place that were part of the state testing accountability pieces. So in 3rd through 8th grade, the new state test is the AASA for ELA and math. It is the same standards, so none of the state standards changed, but the vendor changed, so some of the formatting and question type pieces changed. And then 5th, 8th, and 11th grade, we had the new AZ Sci test, the Arizona Science Test. And then in high school, brand new test for Arizona was the ACT Aspire. All 9th graders take that. And then the 11th grade, we as a district have been giving the ACT for the last few years. It was an optional grant, but it is now the official state test. And the 9th and 11th grade test, new for many of our kids, is it a timed test where the 1 and 3rd through 8th grade is not. So that is something we're definitely working on as a district, is getting kids used to taking timed tests for that part. All right, so I'm going to start with elementary. You see we have our district results for ELA and math, and district average and state average. We were above the district average in every grade level, above the state, and then as a district, we grew about 4% in ELA from the previous year, and in math, we also grew 4% from the previous year. AZ Sci, as I mentioned, brand new test, and the state, our average was again above the state average in all categories, in all grade levels. And then our high schools, the ACT Aspire measures theirs on the percentage of students that are at ready or exceeding readiness in preparation for being successful on the ACT. So in all areas, we were above the state average, much higher than the state average in our English scores, so that was the one that we definitely outperformed, and then definitely some work to do in math and science. Our ACT data, our composite score in all categories except for science were above the state average. Of course, in science, we have the challenge of our 11th graders are taking the AZ Sci test and they're taking the ACT test, and the tests are not alike. So you are preparing students to take 2 tests. The ACT is obviously really important because that's part of our state proficiency, and the AZ Sci test is also very important because that's part of the state accountability part. So the science teachers have a challenge because they're preparing kids for 2 tests. When we talk about activities and things that our teams are doing this year to ensure that our student achievement continues to grow and improve, I have a couple of slides for you. The first one is really focused on what we're doing with district and school leaders. The academic services teams are continuing to support our Title I schools through focused plans and focused grade levels. We are supporting 9 schools this year. Our team worked with the principals to write goals that support improving achievement at our Title I schools, and then those those principals selected grade levels for us to really hone in and focus on. So we are continuing to do that. We have data-focused sessions at all of our monthly principal, assistant principal, and specialist teams meetings. We brought on a new assessment platform, so a lot of our training the first quarter was really getting everybody familiar with that platform and how to use it, how to use the data reports and those types of pieces. We regularly provide those content and instructional practices updates at our principal and assistant principal meetings. And then continuing to work with those different specialist groups, the data specialist, and then a really nice addition this year is Achieve 3000, which is both a reading and math intervention program. We have a dedicated project manager from the vendor who just works with Dysart and comes and provides leadership meetings with the principals, models lessons, lesson plans with teachers, and goes from school to school. She works with us full time, and then she comes and meets with the directors and Dr. Asai and Dr. Croto to give us updates about where we're seeing improvements in the reading scores and math performance for our campuses. For instructional supports, we have a new K-3 and a new 412 math program, so we've really focused our Monday PD time from the district level on providing supports to those so that we have a successful implementation. We are really also, for those who are not part of those 2 groups, trying to focus on providing good instructional practices for our EL and ESS students so that we can continue to provide supports for all subpopulations. And obviously, what are really great best practices for EL and ES students are great best practices for all students. There's a math leadership team that our math specialist, Cammie Bernard, leads. So there's a member from every school that comes and meets with her regularly, and then they go back and are able to support their teachers on their campus with the implementation of our new math curriculum. And we have, as part of our focus for literacy, we are doing both a literacy team for ELA and social studies at the middle school and training on Jane Schaefer writing 512, so that we're using a consistent writing program in all grades, and they're able to use that not only in their English class, but in social studies, and actually in other areas as well, so that they're able to apply that in different subject areas and continue to improve our writing skills. We are doing all kinds of academic services walks for different groups and providing feedback and supports to Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 teachers and different programs. And then the last one is I'm going out and doing data prep connects with teachers with leadership teams and providing those follow-ups to make sure, one, that implementation of our new program, and then really making sure we're honing in on the right pieces when we're having our data meetings. And then with that, we have our new state accountability. Just to give everybody a background, because it's been a few years since we've had state labels, the A to F accountability system was introduced in 1617. Prior to that, instead of it being A to F, they used like exceeding and highly performing, those types. They used it was a phrase. We had labels issued in 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19. Of course, there was no labels for our 2 years of COVID halt, and then labels resumed this past year for 21, 22. The categories have remained. However, some of the components within those categories have changed, and I'm going to address those for K-8 and address those for high school because they're a little bit different. So our K-8 model is made up of 4 categories. Growth is 50%. So half of the A to F label for our K-8 schools is based on the growth component, and that's the major change that we have between this year and what they used in the 2017 through 2019 model. There's proficiency, which is how students perform on that state test. So for them, it was AASA, and then as well as our MSAA for our cognitively disabled students. Your EL performance, so how your students do on the AZELA test, and how they grow from one proficiency level to the next in AZELA. And then that last component is acceleration and readiness, and that encompasses a variety of things. Are we decreasing the number of students who are minimally proficient in reading for 3rd grade? Are we increasing the number of students who are highly proficient in 8th grade math, that readiness of getting them ready for high school, as well as decreasing that 8th grade minimally proficient? And then it has a section on subpopulation performance. So are you improving all of your subpopulation categories? You can see historically, I provided our data from 17, 18, 18, 19, and 21, 22. So this past year, we did see an increase in our letter A letter grades and a decrease in our C letter grades. When the board met this year, they decided to keep the cut scores the same that they have used historically, so that not to change them around. They wanted to be consistent with that. Like I said, there has been, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how this year's components were a little bit different that impacted scores. For the high school model is based on proficiency. So although the high schools take 2 tests, the Aspire and the ACT, the high school proficiency part is only based on that ACT 11th grade test. Growth this year was based on their AZ merit scores compared to ACT, because they didn't have Aspire to change. But in the future, growth will be based on Aspire for freshmen and ACT for the seniors. It's the same testing company. It will provide great growth data. CCRI is that self-reported rubric that we use that tells us how all of our students are ready for college and career. Graduation rates, and then the same EL component for passing AZELA and then showing growth. They set new cut scores for the high schools this time because they are using new assessments. So they left K-8 in the same old model, and they set new cut scores for our high schools. So our high schools, you can see the historical data from 2017. We had no A schools to 4 and 4B, to now we have 3 A schools and 1 B school. So differences in the rules for this year. So this year, previously in the prior 3 years when we used this model, growth was split between student growth percentile and student growth to target. So a really quick student growth percentile is how does Johnny do compared to everybody with the same scale score as Johnny from the prior year. So we call that race against your peers. Do you outperform from one year to the next everybody who had the same scale score as you in the prior year? That is all they used. That was the model they used for growth for this school year. Our district did very, very well in growth this year. When you look at how our students performed compared to areas around us, we had very high growth scores, which is a great celebration. However, when they use the growth to target one, growth to target is student versus themselves. So they set, and they themselves admit it's an arbitrary number. Previously, they used 3 years. So a student had 3 years to get to a target score. So any student who was minimally or partially proficient had 3 years to get to proficient. If you were at proficient, you had 3 years to get to highly, and if you were highly, you had to maintain your highly proficient status. So basically what they would do is they would take Johnny, who had a scale score starting in, I'm gonna use 3rd grade as an example, his first year. And then they look at what the target would be for 3 years out. What is that scale score gonna be? And they divide it in thirds. So I'm gonna use 120 because that's an easy one to say. Year 1, he needs 40 points of scale score growth. Year 2, he needs 40. And year 3, he needs 40. If Johnny doesn't get 40 that first year, Johnny is not on growth to target. So then that means that that would impact his growth score. If Johnny exceeds it and he gets 50 or 60, now in the future, he only needs 40 points to be on target in 3 years. So each individual student has how many points they need to get to target within that set of time. So that is the growth that is usually the other half of our growth. As a district, historically, we don't do as well in growth to target as we do growth percentile. Being the data nerd that I am, I went back and looked. So I went back and looked at our historical average for the 3 years that we used growth to target and growth percentile. And as a district, our average growth points were 6 points less when we are on include growth to target versus just having growth percentile. And that would have impacted labels this year. So had we used growth to target, there would have been about 11 schools, using the average, 11 schools who may have had a score lower than they did this year. So with that, we met with principals and made sure, like, this is coming back. We are 99% sure that the state is bringing growth to target back next year. I hear there's a new superintendent school, so we'll see what the state board and all of them do. But we anticipate growth to target coming back, which means then we need to plan. It's not what we normally do as well in, so we need to make sure that we're addressing that so that we can maintain these A's. Everybody's super excited about having them. We want to maintain them and do the work we need to make sure that we are addressing the individual needs students' need for that part. And then when we talk about the high school rules, as I mentioned, the goal of the Aspire versus ACT is that they have an easy growth comparison for our high schools. However, our current junior class has not taken a state assessment since 7th grade. So they can't use a comparison test. So back in 2019, when we were converting from end of course exams at the high school to AZ Merit, AZM2, they used subpopulation improvement for the growth score for high school. So that'll be based on our current junior, or this school year, they'll use dropout rate improvement, which will be all 4 grades, ACT proficiency improvement, which will be our 11th graders, and then graduation rate improvement, which actually is lagging data. They will use 21 and 22. So we won't have any control over that this academic year because it's already occurred, but our graduation data is always 1 year lagging. So that will be the difference for the high school model, and then they'll use the subpopulation this 1 year, and then they'll go forward with the Aspire compared to the ACT test. And then the last part is, of course, have an increase in A schools. We want to maintain that, and we want all schools to be an A. So we have some action steps that we've been working on to do that. The first is our district is part of AZAC, which is the Arizona Assessment Collaborative. We held a multi-discipline or multi-district principal workshop. We actually housed one here, and then another district held. And there were over 20 districts where principals from across the valley attended, and we broke into what's called their static file, which is their full assessment file, their ADE components, and really dug deep and allowed them to collaborate with each other and really action plan on what their next steps are going to be. We've been really focusing on training school leaders and teachers to understand what these components are and what they come from and what they mean, so that they can then use that data to make instructional decisions. And then the last one, which really is just the most important one, using our benchmarking unit test data to identify the standards that we need to focus on to improve student proficiency and growth. If we're really focusing on standards and what students need to master on the standards, the rest of it takes care of itself. And with that, I will answer any questions.
And before we have any questions, I want to just clarify when Ms. Hartchin indicates that we broke into ADE static file. We have great programmers, but we didn't use them in that capacity. They provided us access to break into that. So.
Thank
I
you.
wouldn't know how to do. I wouldn't know to do that if I had to.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I just have a couple comments. So there's a fine balance here, obviously.
Yep.
We know that there's been student growth, and we definitely need to celebrate the hard work that our students, our teachers, our student families that support the students throughout the year, that they have done to create that student growth. The student growth is very real and definitely should be celebrated. That said, we need to be transparent regarding what these numbers really mean, and I appreciate the fact that you are very transparent in your presentation, defining what this growth to target means, and the elimination of it this year, because these labels have gained popularity on social media, and facts are being distorted. So again, I appreciate you taking the time to illustrate some of the results of this removing the growth to target. It's caused some disparaging comments being made about this administration and this board in regard to recent changes in leadership, unfortunately, and unexpectedly, Ms. Sawyer-Singfeld kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. We did have one community member post just a friendly reminder in case you see certain people trying to take credit for this. And I just want to explain. I've spoken to several district administrators and teachers. No one is viewing this as something to take credit for at all. These labels are not true indicators of our district's progress in 2022. As we've learned, 11 of our schools would not have been granted the higher label if they were measured the same way they were measured in previous years. These labels are not comparing apples to apples. Based on our scores, if the same measure was used in 2022 as it was in previous years, our labels would likely have fallen. I believe our current administration understands this. I believe they're already working very hard to make up for the academic losses that were sustained, which will likely be reflected in next year's labels if growth to target is added back into the equation. I don't know what the rationale was in removing growth to target, causing many district labels to be inflated. I can only speculate the obvious. But it caused a real disservice to many districts who will likely be facing a large drop in labels next year. I believe the stakeholders in our community deserve honesty and transparency, so I'm thankful that you've highlighted this caveat during your presentation. Again, I do celebrate wholeheartedly the student growth that has been made, and appreciate everyone who has taken part in making those gains for our students. But based on some of these scores, I feel confident in saying that we can do better, and our students deserve better. I mean, you had mentioned in your presentation, referencing how Dysart's above the state average. Well, when the state average is 29% in 7th grade math, I don't necessarily feel we've met where we need, we haven't arrived yet at our 27%.
Right.
So I do feel that there's a lot of work still to be done. I feel like our state has a lot of work to do when it comes to raising the bar in education, and I'm hopeful that Dysart, and I know with the leaders that we have in place, can definitely get us there, and I believe that we can lead by example. But I know we're capable of doing it, but I am concerned about
where our state is in education and just wanting to make sure Dysart continues to push forward as I know we can. But I do appreciate you taking the time to illustrate that point in your presentation.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just one quick one, Ms. Harchin. With the student growth to target, and I don't want to focus on one particular one over the other, do we know what the rationale was as to why?
So they said because we had a couple years gap, there was a
Because
couple
of the
years where
gap.
students didn't take a test. So then the target would have been disrupted because there wasn't 3 consecutive years of data for them to use for this label. And then we had switched from the AZM2 to AASA. So that was the rationale. They did, when they initially put the business rules, talk about putting it back in, but decided ultimately the advisory team decided not to do that.
And I would add that we went into the calculation period fully expecting that it would be in as part of the formula, and then we and all other districts were surprised when they didn't include it at the end.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
May I just conclude this presentation by stating that while we celebrate student growth and we celebrate, we don't set the rules. The state sets the rules, and we celebrate how we compared in those rules. We are not satisfied with where we are as a school district, and we are, I believe everyone in this room that directly involved would indicate to you that we are pushing very hard to make sure that we work to get the achievement level of our students to the level that this community deserves, and that is our effort, and that's our focus at this time. So, and will remain to be so.
I appreciate that, and I have every confidence that you'll get us where we need to be. So thank you. All right, next we will move to information discussion item G2, information on school counselors. Dr. Dean?
Madam President, members of the governing board, cabinet, and our community, this information item comes as a request from one of our governing board members who was unable to attend our last meeting, and so we've moved it to this meeting, and Dr. Croto will present some information related to our high school counselors. Dr. Croto.
Thank you, Dr. Dean. Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Dean, cabinet, and guests. As a request of a board member, we will discuss some counselor to student ratios tonight. I have some information just to share with you. Our current district total, and this is including our 4 high schools and Sundown, currently sits at a ratio of 365 students to 1 counselor, with Sundown kind of and high school kind of skewing it because they are so small. So if you take that school out, our district total without Sundown and high school is actually 375 to 1. Our district staffing standard that you approve in our staffing numbers each year is actually 440 to 1. So we are under that. The national counselor ratio in the year of 2021, just so you look at it, if we look nationally, was 415 to 1. And the Arizona counselor ratio, and I've got this from ASCA, the American School Counselor Association, which is big. Believe it or not, the Arizona ratio, and I double and triple check this, is 716 to 1 for Arizona in the year 2021. And I couldn't believe it either. I double checked, triple checked, and I do have the printout right here that shows what the state averages are. So anyway, I looked at some surrounding districts. Peoria Unified did not have a set staffing standard as we do. In talking to the person that's in charge of the counseling there, they do not have a set staffing standard. However, right now she felt they are running about 400 to 1 if you took it in their schools. And the Deer Valley ratio, they do have a set standard of 450 to 1, and currently they're running about 394 to 1. But their set standard is 450 to 1. And as I mentioned before, Dysart in itself, our set standard is 440 to 1. We are either at 365 if you want to include high school and Sundown, or 375 if you take that one school out that kind of skews it because they're smaller. So with that, I will take any questions you may have.
That hurts. Honestly, that hurts. That puts a lot on our school counselors. And even though it's in comparison to the other districts, that's just a lot that we have put on our counselors. What other duties besides college and career readiness do our counselors do?
We do have them. We do have them do some testing areas. I did check around too. As part of the request was to see if they did sub. And checking with the 4 high schools, we had no counselors sub in full classrooms this year or last year. So according to the principals and the principal secretaries. So we do ask them to teach. They teach lessons. They have given lessons that they go in to teach on certain counseling pieces. And we do ask, or they do do some testing things when testing season comes up. So we ask them to do that too.
And Madam President, Member Soares-Sinkpil, I would add that in terms of the classes that they teach, they are related to courses that we offer, making students aware of those, and assisting in the course selection piece and the college and career readiness piece. Our high school counselors are academic guidance counselors, and so their responsibility is to assist students as their incoming freshmen until they graduate, to make sure that they continue to stay on track to graduate, that they answer any questions related to dual enrollment or advanced placement or honors courses as well. And so our counselors are not used as social counselors or social workers. We have social workers to take care of that piece, but their responsibility in their job description relates to academic guidance.
So they don't do anything having to do with the 504 plan, IEPs, or anything like that?
Madam President, Member Soares-Sinkpil, they may be part of an IEP team if needed or requested. In terms of 504, they may be requested to sit into those meetings and just be part of the knowledge base that's related to 504s and making sure that we meet a student's 504 needs. However, like I stated, we do not in our high schools have mental health counselors. Their job is primarily academic guidance and making sure our students are ready for whatever future lies beyond their time with us in our high schools.
Okay. Right now we have a total of 1 counselor at Sundown, 4 at Dysart High, right? 6 at Valley, 6 at Shadow, and 5 at Willow Canyon. So each of those.
Madam President, Members Soares-Sinkpil, reverse that. I have 5 at Shadow, 6 at Valley, and 6 at Willow.
And
Unless
one of the Willow
numbers are
Canyon
here.
counselors is on a grant, is grant
Yes.
funded as well.
On a grant, okay. So carrying a caseload of 400 plus, and you said that the ASCA was 716 to 1?
The ratio in year 2020, 2021, the state ratio student to school counselors in Arizona was 716 to 1. That is correct.
Okay, so how can a counselor be fully effective with the 716 students that they're trying to get ready for either college or career?
That is a great question, and we are not at 716 to 1. So
No, I'm just saying general. I'm just saying
hypothetical, yes, that would
Oh,
be very.
hypothetical.
I would find it very hard to do at 716 to 1.
I mean, even at 440, which is what the board approved,
Correct.
Correct.
And we're at 375.
375.
And those numbers, Madam President, Members Soares-Sinkpil, those numbers are as of 11/15. So they are the numbers I give you as of 11/15, so they're very fresh numbers.
Now, I know that you have mentioned that our guidance counselors don't have anything to do with social workers or act as social workers or anything like that. Are they, how can I put this? Are they assuming the role in different situations as mental health or social worker capacities?
I would say yes at times. They're not going to turn away a student that needs help. obviously. If a student needs help or comes to talk to them, sure, they do. They're not going to turn away and say, sorry, I can't talk to you, but they do find avenues or refer them to the other people needed and provide those services to help that student out. So there are times, are they solely responsible for that? No. But like I said, there are times I'm sure they are presented with that and many different things, but they're there to help find the avenues to best suit that student.
And I know everybody that's in the school district, teachers, classified, directors, even including counselors, there are things that have been placed on their plates and we make do. With counselors, are they getting too many things put on their plates? And that's a loaded question, but.
Madam President, Member Seor-Singpil, I'm happy to answer that question, and I would say that we have been very cognizant of the responsibilities of our counselors, and I would just take this second to state publicly, and I hope they know this because we try to tell them when we can. Our counselors are fantastic.
Yes,
we have great high school counselors, but we have been very intentional in our approach with our high schools to not pull them to sub and not place additional duties on their shoulders. Their role is vital to our students being successful in graduating, and so we've been very cognizant about that as we move forward. As the board is aware, in the last several years, we have had issues with shortage of subs and those types of things. High schools have different opportunities to address that than elementary schools do because they have many teachers on prep that can cover a time here and there. And so we've worked really hard the last 2 years to not pull our counselors to sub or place a lot of things on their plate that aren't related to their job responsibilities.
I just want to make sure that each and every person that's within this district, I want to make sure that they don't feel overwhelmed. And even though that our counselors are trying to get students graduated from high school and off into, whether it's a career, whether it's college, whether it's military, whatever avenue, that they have the opportunity and the number of hours during the day and the week in order to help our students be successful when they leave this front door.
Madam President, Member Seor-Singpil, I would say with confidence that the answer to that is yes, that they do have that time. We all wear a lot of hats. The key is to make sure that we can still get through the door without knocking the hats off, right? But we try really hard to balance to make sure that if any additional hats are worn, it's not impacting any employee's primary responsibilities as we move forward. And we certainly have been very cognizant of that with our folks in the high schools.
Has there been any discussion on getting that ratio down from 375 to lower?
Madam President, Member Seor-Singpil, we actually celebrate that number compared to other school districts and compared to what's happening across the nation. You all know me, I'm a straight shooting guy. We have not had any conversations about lowering that number. Any additional counselors that we would add would take away from teachers that we would add in the classroom and could potentially raise class size. And so we are happy that we are well below the ratio number that we have established with the board at about 375 as opposed to 440. And right now, we're just in a mode where we'd like to keep that going as long as we possibly can.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Croto.
And Madam President and Member Seor-Singpil, you were right on your numbers. I read them wrong. So yes, Willow Canyon is 5 and Shadow Ridge is 6. I believe that's what I just want to go on record saying you were correct. So.
All right. Thank you.
If I could just ask a quick question about this. I think you mentioned it was Willow that has a granted position.
Madam President, Ms. Densmore, both Willow Canyon and I believe Dysart High School have grant-funded positions, yes.
And I'm assuming, I know that we look for those opportunities whenever they are available. I'm assuming that we would look for those opportunities as they are presented.
Madam President, Ms. Densmore, yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, the state is getting ready to release opportunities in January for additional grant funds. that you can write for school resource officers, counselors, et cetera. Mr. Musey is ready and waiting to submit those applications, and we are excited to submit both for school resource officers and other possibilities as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
The 440 to 1, was that through like the MOU?
Madam President, yes, and for the best of my recollection, as long as I have been an assistant superintendent back to my HR days, we've had that ratio at 440 to 1.
It
And
is in the MOU, and it is in the staffing standards, the front office staffing standards that you approve every year as part of the HR package.
And I'm assuming there was a counselor probably that had the opportunity to give feedback or be a part of that process when that decision was made?
I don't recall that directly. However, I will tell you that it was a couple of DEA presidents ago when I recall that when I was an assistant super for HR that number was created. Knowing that person, I would have assumed that she would have had conversations with them as well. But to Ms. Sawyer-Sinkbill's point, we would love for all of our ratios to be lower across the district in every aspect that we have. We are thankful that we are well below that number right now with our counseling ratio, but that number has been, I'm trying to think when I went into HR, it may be as long as 12 years old, that ratio at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
That was fast math.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a point of clarification. So I know that it was previously stated that is something that the board approves each year, but prior to it coming to the board, that is a decision through the IBA process, correct? Which the board is not necessarily a direct partner in.
Madam President, Ms. Densmore, the answer is yes, in terms of to lower that number, that recommendation would come from the IBA team.
Okay.
In order to lower that number, something else would have to give with IBA, and so that's kind of where those come from. There are several discussions that occur every year in IBA that never materialize. This is one that we haven't talked about for some time.
Thank you, Dr. Pardo.
Right, next we move to item I, executive session. We have a call for executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A2 and oh, I'm sorry. Do we have any requests for future agenda items? All right, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Now we'll move to item I, executive session. We have a call for executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A2 and A3 and ARS 15-843A for the purpose of reviewing and consideration of the hearing officer's recommendation to expel a student in the student discipline matter HOR 2223-015 and receive legal advice from the attorney for the public party regarding the same. So at this time, I move that we adjourn to executive session.
Second.
Motion made by Christine Pritchard, seconded by Don Densmore.
Joe.
Joe. It was Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I started and then she finished.
Okay, I knew I heard your voice.
I know.
All right.
What?
Until it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Can we
Motion
audit this
carries.
vote?
Okay, at this time, we'll reconvene the regular meeting and move to item J, action discussion, J1, recommendation to expel a student in the matter of student discipline hearing, HOR 2223-015. And at this time, I move the governing board expel a student in the matter of student discipline hearing, HOR 2223-015.
Second.
Motion made by Christine Pritchard, seconded by Dawn Densmore. Motion carries. Next, we move to item K, adjournment. I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Motion made by Christine Pritchard, seconded by Tracy Sawyer-Singfield. That's the plan. Okay. Motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you. Have a good night.